It was the summer of 2021, and the country was still in the grip of the COVID-19 shutdown. It was a time of reflection for many. One thought that struck me was the history of Botox and the amazing man who made it happen. Botox is a big deal today, and I knew that how this drug came to be safe for human use would make a great story. But if it was going to be told, I had to write it now because only a few of us who used Botox in trials were still alive to tell the story firsthand. Botox is a cultural phenomenon, a noun, a verb, and an adjective. It is a drug that is familiar to hundreds of millions worldwide, with tens of millions using it for a range of treatments. Botox smooths facial wrinkles, controls migraine pain, straightens misaligned eyes, calms hyperactive bladders, and much more. This molecule, found in nature, generates sales in the multi-billions of dollars worldwide under several different names. Botox is the brand synonymous with this drug, as Kleenex is for facial tissues. Yet few people know that 2 centuries ago, this lethal toxin was a dealer of death in epidemic proportions. In 1822, Dr. Justinus Kerner, a district health officer dealing with botulism poisoning in southern Germany, made a daring prediction. The fatty acid, from the blood sausage, could be of benefit in many diseases. He was right. Thanks to Dr. Alan B. Scott, today, 200 years later, this once dreaded toxin is a drug that treats rather than creates human maladies. Death to Beauty describes the monumental feat of Scott, a practicing ophthalmologist in San Francisco who also worked as a part-time independent researcher without a regular source of funding. Alan Scott's work on the project began in 1961, and on December 29, 1989, his drug, at the time it was called oculinum, received FDA approval. Incredibly, in the process, Scott spent just over $4 million, unlike the hundreds of millions or even $1 billion usually spent in developing a new drug today. As an ophthalmologist of the same era, I knew Alan professionally beginning in the 1970s, followed his research, and joined the open clinical trial of botulinum toxin type A for the treatment of strabismus, misaligned eyes, and dystonia, muscle spasm, in 1982. In the 1950s, young men like us, and a few women, who studied in medical school and were graduating to internships, were unmarried or, in a few cases, just recently hitched. Starchy white uniforms, often including a shirt and a tie, were de rigueur. A hospital patient's routine laboratory admission workup was done by a student or house officer in a small lab on the ward. Biopsies and lumbar punctures were often performed at the bedside or in a nearby treatment room. For every inpatient, a detailed handwritten history and physical examination was recorded on their chart. Intensive care units had not been established, and critically ill patients, like those suffering a heart attack, were frequently attended with a night-long vigil. Wages were low, meals were free, hours were long, and camaraderie prevailed. I recall members of our silent generation looking ahead with confidence, optimism, and a can-do spirit, and this attitude describes Alan B. Scott to a T.